Hi everyone, my name is Gary, and first of all I'd like to thank Singapore Poly and IHRP for inviting me here to speak to all of you with regards to this topic called how to create relevance for your audience. So just a bit to share about myself before I talk about the topic today. So I come from a HR background. I've been in HR for the past 18 years and I've been very involved in people development. And looking at how learning and development has evolved through the years from face-to-face workshops to where we are today. And I think especially with the current situation that's happening globally, a lot of us have transited to virtual learning. One big question that a lot of HR professionals have on their mind is, with all that's been happening and with digital learning now in place, how can we create better relevance for our audience? So getting down to the proper, let me do a quick introduction of my organization, Keppel Corp. So Keppel Corp is a leading multinational company with presence in more than 20 countries. Headquartered in Singapore, proud to be Singaporean. We have presence, as I mentioned, in over 20 countries with over 15,000 employees worldwide. So in the Keppel environment, because we have so many different business units, we cater to many different kinds of learning audiences. So how can we create relevance for colleagues who say come from offshore marine where practical details are more important, or where we talk about property where we look into asset management. So in this context, that's where I'm going to be sharing more about how to create relevance for your audience in learning. So today's objective is to share great learning experiences through storytelling. Over the years, what I've realized is that regardless of how young or how old we are, everybody loves to listen to a good story. It always begins with, let me tell you a story. And by doing so, it just changes the whole feel of the audience. And behind every story, there's usually a lesson to be learned. And this is where true learning takes place. So I like to bring that particular context into the world of learning. How can we design better learning experiences through storytelling? Learning challenges today. I think if this topic was presented a decade ago, I think the challenges would be very different. But we are where we are today, where information is commonplace. There are so many different online providers where learning becomes the norm. Some of us have Coursera accounts or Udemy accounts and so on and so forth, right? And learning can even turn mobile. Some of us have even started using YouTube to find information. So looking at it from a learner's perspective, what are some of the real challenges that they face today? The first challenge is that there's just too much information. When we want to find something that we need to know, the first place we tend to go to is Google. For some of us, when we have spare time, we sit down in front of our computer. Sometimes we don't know what to surf. If you think about it, there are probably billions of websites out there. And yet, on a daily basis, we go back to the same few websites that we're just so used to. Google, YouTube, maybe some form of social media. There's just so much information that comes in, we can't tell the difference between what's real and what's fake anymore. Information that we perhaps shared years ago might not ring true today. I remember when I was in school, Pluto was a planet. And 5 years ago, they said Pluto wasn't a planet. And in today's context, Pluto is sort of a planet, but maybe a microplanet. So information is always changing, and it's a struggle for learners to perpetually keep up with what's relevant. So in the world of learning, in the world of designing learning, I think the key thing is to look into how we can curate learning for the learners. Next, can't connect to the content. How often has it happened when you have sat through a lecture or sat through a meeting and you can't seem to connect to whatever that's being said? Because of the massive amounts of content that's available today, it is very tough for learning designers to craft the content that's suited to a particular audience, especially when there's a lot of content to go through. Many organizations today are all embarking on digital transformation, digitalizing the way they do work. AI is coming in, automation is coming in. And because of my computer science background, I found that what seemed foreign to other colleagues around me actually made sense. And from a learning design point of view, it's important for us to see it from our audience's eyes and understand how can we make the content purposeful for them, rather than try to do it the other way around. The other challenge that learners are facing today is difficulty adopting different learning mediums. I think for a lot of us, it's a very common challenge we face daily. How often has it been that, when we go out with a group of friends, or when we go out with our loved ones, and the favorite question comes up, what would you like to eat? And the answer always comes back with anything. Simply because there's just too many choices around, we don't know what to choose from. And the thing is that today, if you look at, especially in Singapore, we can learn through desktops, we can learn through mobile, we can do peer learning, and even within the mobile, there are many different apps that we can use to learn. Some preach gamification. Some are very simple tools just to push articles or knowledge or videos to you. And it's a struggle for some of us trying to accustom ourselves to a particular way of learning. Next, limiting beliefs about learning. The favorite ones I've heard is that they have no time to learn. And it's a constant battle between learning designers and learners. When learners say that, I don't have time to learn anymore. So what learning designers have started to do is to create micro-learning. And even with micro-learning, right, which means short bits of learning where it only takes a couple of minutes, learners still say, it's not enough. I need it to shrink even further. So now the common term used is nano-learning. It's under a minute, right? There will always be challenges with beliefs. Like I've even heard some people say, I'm too old to adopt new technologies. And there's a Chinese saying that goes, 人老但是心不老，你就不老. So even though you're old, but if what's inside you still remains young, then the way you behave will always be youthful. So limiting beliefs about learning have constantly evolved also because of the way the world has evolved. Next, lack of resources to learn. And I think especially in the corporate world, it's not so much about funds, about finances. I think it's also a lot about time and also a lot about attention. If you think about it, in a place like Singapore, there are many things that distract us. Singapore is very well known for its citizens or its inhabitants sleeping way beyond 10. In fact, a lot of the peers around me, they sleep at 10 p.m. It's way too early. A lot of us sleep at about midnight, maybe even 1 a.m. And the reason is because there's just so many things competing for our attention. From our social life, to our family life, to even technology, media. So there's just a lack of resources available for us to learn. So from a learning design perspective, how can we quickly capture the attention of the learner in terms of the design that we do? So coming to that particular point, I'd like to share very, very quickly 5 E's of storytelling. I'm not going to share with you the latest emerging technologies because by the time you watch this, who knows, maybe a new emerging technology may come about. In the good old days, that's not too long ago, people went crazy over virtual reality. And then it became augmented reality. And today we're talking about mixed reality. Who knows when the next one is coming out? So let's begin with the first E. The first E begins with engaging with your audience. And what is most important is to understand who your audience is first. For example, if I am doing online learning, to me, my target audience isn't just any learner who goes online. There is a specific crowd that I'm looking for. Like for example, if you look at people who believe a lot in Apple, people who believe a lot in Microsoft, they are both operating systems. They both serve more or less the same function. But the users will tell you that the reason why they chose a particular brand is because it appeals to them. Like what I noticed a lot about Apple users is they look into design, they look into creativity. Whereas if you talk about Microsoft, especially like Office 365, we're talking a lot about efficiency, productivity. So it targets very different customers. And from a learning perspective, I need to first identify who is my target audience. And then once I've established who my target audience is, the next point is, then why should they give you attention? I think a lot of the learning design tends to focus on the what. What is my content? How we can, what is it all about? How you can apply it. But let's take it a step back. Why should I even listen to you? Why should I even invest even 1 minute of my time listening to your video? And the next part comes to pace current experiences. Like if you notice what's been happening on LinkedIn, one of the big topics that have come about, at least in the first 6 months since the start of 2020, there were 2 keywords that came out: tech, business, and COVID. Fast forward to today. If you look at the keywords, it's slightly evolved. COVID doesn't seem to be very popular anymore. The word change comes about. The word digital comes about. So it's about pacing current experiences. It also goes to show that we invest the time to understand our audience a bit better. And the next thing is to set the stage. Like what I did earlier today in this presentation, setting the stage is just to share with you about how to do better storytelling. That is the stage. Are you expected to walk away being able to design a great learning experience all of a sudden? No, it's just to be able to craft a better story, setting the stage. The next one, eliciting emotions. If you think about it, shows or movies that resonate a lot with us, the ones that we recall the most, are those that can draw emotions out from us. And here are just some things to share with you about emotions. All learning is state dependent. Like I've heard some people say, look, Gary, I can't learn unless I'm in the mood to. What they're essentially telling you is, look, I can't learn unless I'm in the right emotional state. And it's important as part of our learning design to ensure that the learners are in a positive state before we start to share with them further. If you think about all the workshops that you've attended in the past, a lot of the facilitators like to start off with icebreakers, or they like to start off with general introductions. Why do they do that? It's because they want to make the learners feel comfortable. They want to make the learners feel safe. So all learning is state dependent. And when we talk about eliciting emotions, the next point is to look into a problem to a solution state. Now this has got a lot to do with creating relevance for the audience. Because if I don't have a problem, why should I be listening to you to solve something? So for those who are more prone to or more proficient in marketing, you realize that we either identify a problem or we create a problem. Because in terms of creating a problem, sometimes people don't even know that this is a problem until you call it out, right? So moving from a problem to a solution state. And then the last one is to create a moving storyline. Now, when we think of a moving storyline, the best example I like to give is how each one of us deals with negative emotions. It could be something small, it could be something big. We always start off with feeling sad. And we've got friends around us, relatives around us who tell us, snap out of it, stop being sad, be happy. Realistically, that's impossible. To go from a sad to a happy state immediately is just not a natural thing to do. Some psychologists may call it going through the grief process. And you realize that's something that we naturally do. We go from sad to perhaps denial, perhaps to acceptance, and then to hope, to curiosity, to peace, and finally to happiness. So that's something that I like to inculcate in anyone who wants to do design, be it learning design or product design, is to look into the storyline. Create a moving storyline where You bring the learners or the audience along with you through an emotional ride. And the next E that I'm looking at is education through involvement. So education through involvement means don't tell them what to do, but involve them. That's why you notice that learning designs have inculcated a lot of game-based simulations to involve the learners a lot more. And I think rather than think along the lines of complicated games that target a very specific set of audience, just think along the lines of very simple games. If you're targeting the masses, for example, look at a simple game like Pokemon Go. Pokemon Go is augmented reality. The graphics aren't fantastic, but it appealed to the masses. The gameplay was so easy. It was easy for people to pick it up, and it became very addictive. Now, let me contrast this with one of the award-winning games. For example, let's look at Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is, in terms of graphics, wow, and the storyline and everything, but it appeals to a very skewed, a very narrow set of audience, right? And because of that, it loses a lot of people along the way. So you have to ask yourself, what kind of audience are you targeting? And from there, don't tell them, involve them. Once you know your target audience, it's easier for you to involve them. Now, next, create social opportunities. What I realized about this recent pandemic is that there's been a rise in virtual workshops. And I've seen how different service providers have done it. And what I found to be the most successful so far is to talk less and let them talk more. Virtual workshops that allow learners to interact with one another actually increases the learner engagement and learner absorption rate as well, because they learn from one another. So when it comes to learning design or product design, for example, if you can give people an opportunity to socialize, then the story becomes more enriching. And the last point under educate through involvement is to instill moments of success. Now, drawing back the example of Pokemon Go, you realize that when they first launched the game, it was very easy for you to catch. It was very easy for you to win. And because of that, people keep searching for the next win, the next win. So to create moments of success, imagine if you had designed a game or designed a learning experience where the failure rate was very high. I can almost guarantee you that people will drop out very, very quickly because people like to feel successful. Moving away from this E, we look through evoke observable changes. Because especially when it comes to the learning realm, it's important not just for people to feel good after the learning experience, but to ensure that change has been created. And that is often a very big challenge when it comes to learning design. So it's to help learners to understand that it will get worse before it gets better. And in fact, when learners go through a learning experience, they stumble, they fall, it's okay. It goes to show that they are learning. And it's important to highlight this to them. Next one, feedback loop. Now, if you notice, a lot of apps have gotten smarter today. In terms of the design, learners are able to get immediate feedback loop. Like, for example, I think now it's pretty common to have like those singing apps that grade you on your singing, right? So in the old days, before you had all these singing apps, you had to depend on your friends when you go and sing karaoke. And of course, friends who are nicer will say, oh, your singing is pretty good, even though if you really sung in front of a crowd, you probably won't make it too far. But this singing app, or apps around, gives you immediate feedback on, okay, so where do you stand and how you can improve. And for learners, this is something that's very important. They want immediate feedback on how they're doing and how they can do better. So moving to the next one, accountability and ownership. So it's important when it comes to a learning experience to make sure that the learners themselves are also accountable for their learning. So a good example, if you look at some of the online learning providers, what they have done is they have installed a reminder for learners to set how frequent they want the reminders to be and how they would like their learning to be measured. So this puts some kind of accountability on the learners as well, because they are the ones who decided how often they should be prompted, and what kind of measurements they should be using to measure their own learning success. Which brings me to the last E, which is end with a positive. So when we talk about ending with a positive, we talk about learning and neurochemicals. If we want learning to be locked in successfully, we usually talk about utilizing neurochemicals like dopamine and serotonin. Now, without getting too much into the details, it focuses a lot on making people feel happy, feel a calm, and feel a sense of safety when it comes to learning. Now, on the flip side, if we create a learning experience where people are perpetually on edge, if people feel stress or anxiety, you realize that people will either forget very quickly or they'll remember the learning for the wrong reasons. Next, anchor it with positive experiences. And bring back to the point I mentioned earlier about creating social opportunities. When you have people socializing, it helps to anchor the positive experience when it comes to learning design. And the last one is about continuous learning. Because whenever we talk about, especially like virtual seminars or we talk about face-to-face workshops, people usually feel that sense of like, it just stopped there. Like, okay, my learning has ended. So in your learning design, if you can help the learners continue their learning, be it peer-to-peer learning or going onto an online platform where they can continue to share and to learn from others. This helps to reinforce the positivity that learners have when it comes to learning experiences. Now, these 5 E's make up what we call storytelling, whether be it from a learning experience or whether be it product design. If I look at it from a consumer perspective, just putting it into context, ending off with a positive. If you think about the products that you have bought before, more often than not, we continue to buy similar products or the same brand because the experience was good. If the experience was bad, we will immediately write off the product or service immediately. And to sum all up today, I like to end off with a quote from one of my favorite authors. He's a Brazilian author. He has wrote many different books. But one of the books that have impacted me the most is this book called The Alchemist. And this is what he says. He says that the simple things are also the most extraordinary things, and only the wise can see them. For those of you who are looking into the world of design thinking, our ultimate goal is to create simplicity. At the same time, to achieve simplicity is not an easy thing to do. From a learning professional's perspective, this is also something that I would like to share. That sometimes the simplest of things requires the most complex of thoughts. So with that, I hope you have enjoyed the session and continue to enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you very much.